Well, it's a good observation, Werner. I have written about many great egomaniacs of the 20th century American landscape. And Kellogg and Kinsey certainly rank up there, but nobody was quite as flamboyant and lived quite as crazy a life as Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, yes, I've been living in this house for 16 years and restoring it. And certainly I had, during this period, I thought, well, you know, I should write a novel about Frank Lloyd Wright. He fits just in with these other figures I've written about. But it took me a while to get around to it. In fact, I've calculated that I've written 12 other books in this very house before I got around to Frank Lloyd Wright. But here it is. Many people today don't really know the story of Frank Lloyd Wright and how disordered his life was, his personal life. Unlike me, an artist who needs complete peace and tranquility in order to create, Frank Lloyd Wright seemed to need tumult in his life. And he constantly fomented tumult. He was always being hounded by bill collectors. In one case, the sheriff who came to arrest him for non-payment. The various lawyers of his ex-wives, the press. He seemed to need this kind of tumult in his life in order to have creative energy. Every book is different, Werner, as you well know. It would have been easy to replicate what I'd done in Dr. Sex, The Inner Circle, by simply having an acolyte tell the story in the first person of his growing disillusionment with the master. But in this case, because there was so much information to deliver, and I wanted to delve into the architecture as well as the personality of the man, I came up with a unique structure. It's not only different from what I've done before, but it seemed to suit this project. And so, in my telling, there are many levels of narration. For instance, Tadashi Sato, who gives the introductions, the long introductions to each of the three sections of the book, represents himself as having presented this biographical memoir of his time with Frank Lloyd Wright. And certainly he provided the information. And yet, as you read and you see the footnotes that he gives to this text, you wonder how much of this he wrote and how much his grandson-in-law, Liam O'Flaherty, the Irish novelist, Irish-American novelist, has written. So it gives a lot of texture to it. Furthermore, when we do go into the third-person text, it has the authority not only of Tadashi Sato and the facts of Frank Lloyd Wright's life, but also this further layer of narration presented by O'Flaherty-san. We don't know how much he invented and how much is the true facts of the case. So that was a lot of fun for me. Furthermore, in giving the third-person sections on each of the three major women and also on Kitty, his first wife, this enables me to take the story backwards in time, even as Tadashi moves his forward, so that you get a perspective on how relationships develop and sour along the way. And by the way, you have lots of fun with it. You know, this is a hilarious book. And the footnotes not only inform you about facts about Wright's architecture, but they also, because Tadashi is writing them when he's revising this manuscript, they also can be very funny, like little jokes that leap off the page. And I had a lot of enjoyment in creating that. That's a great question. Was he a womanizer without a specific type of woman because his women were very different from one another? I wonder. And I wonder, too, if he was a womanizer. It seemed to me that he was equal partners with the women in his life, and that in the case of at least two of them, Miriam, who is the star of this book, by the way, and Olgivanna, they seem to have manipulated him into their relationship as much as he felt that he was the motivating force. And I don't know if they were all that different, really, except for his first wife, Kitty, his first love with whom he had 6 children, whom he deserted, by the way, in 1909 when this house was built in order to go to Germany with his Wasmuth portfolio. The other three were all very glamorous in one way or another. And all three had European connections and were very sophisticated. And I think this appealed to him because, after all, he was, and he would have told us if he were here, a country boy who was not educated beyond a single year or even a single semester in college. So I think there was a great attraction in these sophisticated worldly women. Well, I barely remember the 1920s. I was just a kid back then, so I don't know how it might have been an era of prudery. From what I understand of history, it was quite the opposite. It was sort of like the 60s, in which anything goes. Miriam was very sexually adventurous and had lived in Paris for 10 years, and in fact was a morphine addict as well. So I don't know if we would characterize the period as being particularly prudish or repressed. I don't think that's the case at all. How would I compare it to the George Bush era? It's hard to compare anything to the George Bush era other than than a nuclear holocaust. So this is a tough political question. I didn't expect political questions when I'm talking about a novel set in the last century, but I'll address it as best I can. I support Obama. I voted for Obama. I'm delighted he's here. I hope for the best. Certainly, after the 8 years of depredations the world has seen, anything will be an improvement, and I have some modest hopes. As far as what America has accomplished, I can't really speak to that except as a citizen of the country. I will say that we have given the world rock and roll, which is, I think, our premier export. Coca-Cola was second on my list, I suppose, of the greatness of American industry and might. And I think we've given the world some pretty good literature, too. Another great question. Well, certainly the underdog plays a big role in a lot of what I've written, as you mentioned, in the Tortilla Curtain and Drop City and so on. But I think even more than that, there's a kind of search in these books for the American utopia. Don't forget, the country was founded by people who came here from England to form individual colonies along religious lines. And it's been true throughout our history that people have sought wide open spaces to get away from society and to create their own small societies within it. It's a very enchanting dream that I think all people in all nations have, to throw off the shackles of whatever the society is that you're living in and create your own. This is very appealing to me, as it is to most Americans. However, so far, in my fictional representations of it, or I should say explorations, things haven't worked out that well.